Do you guys think a chapter of Space Marines could actually take Pandora? Not a legion or anything like that, not even without other help from the Imperium. Just a single chapter landing on the planet. How do you guys think they'd fare? Hello, and welcome to Homebrew Heresy, where we bring your heretical ideas to life, taking all your favorite characters and factions and translating them into 40k. Today on our journey to try and make my father notice me, we're covering the military-industrial complex that is the RDA, otherwise known as the Sky People to the Alien Cat People of James Cameron's Avatar franchise. So then, in order for us to build the Sky People, it's important for us to learn about their origins and history. The RDA was short for Resource Development Administration, which on a side note, I can see why they stay with RDA, because that's a fucking mouthful. Having been founded at some point in the early 21st century, the company would quickly make a name for themselves by creating the revolutionary maglev trains. This allowed thousands of people to be transported hundreds of miles in a matter of minutes. How they did this, I cannot fully imagine, but what I do know is that a crucial component in the maintenance and operation of these trains was unobtainium, that really dumbly named rock that floats in the air on its own. Yes, the floating feature is an actual property of it. The thing was, this material was not just extremely rare, but refining and processing this element was extremely toxic. Because of this, you'd think this rock wouldn't be worth mining, but you'd be wrong. The maglev trains were so efficient in transporting people across the world in record time that it allowed for a new age of economic growth. Because of this, it created a demand for unobtainium unlike anything seen before, as the entire world suddenly became dependent on it. Moreover, there were talks to use maglev trains to make colonization of planets and far-off solar systems a real possibility, using their vast wealth and resources to help develop impoverished countries or cripple rival companies before actually absorbing them. Under their watchful gaze, humanity managed to not only leave our dirtball of a planet behind, they industrialized the moon and actually began settling on other worlds, like Mars and Venus. Over time, they would manage to set up numerous mining facilities all across the system, all of which were intended on harvesting any last trace of unobtainium left. Even with these vast successes, there was still one issue that still plagued the RDA. Earth was dying. With a population of over 20 billion people, resources were becoming even more scarce, and heavy industrialization of the planet and continued use of unobtainium also messed with the planet's biosphere. Acid rain became increasingly more frequent alongside a growing spike in cancers and other health and ecological issues. And so, when word reached those in charge that there was a planet in the nearby Alpha Centauri system that could not only support life, but because of its unique planetary makeup, was expected to have an overwhelming abundance of unobtainium. A discovery that would naturally push the RDA to break as many restrictions as they could, from forming their own elite private military to developing extrasolar starships to the use of controversial cloning and gene splicing technologies. The only exception to what they could not do was that they were unable to transport nuclear weapons. So, when you guys are watching the RDA get slaughtered by people riding horses and shooting arrows, remember, the reason they aren't just nuking them from orbit is because they can't. Anything that could have classified as an orbit-to-surface weapon was strictly prohibited, not just because it was considered a war crime, but because the possibility such weapons could be used against human-occupied worlds was too much of a risk. And honestly, I kinda gotta respect the in-depth world building here. At any rate, after the first transport ships finally arrived on Pandora, the heading members of the RDA discovered no forms of advanced society, and only one potentially sapient species. These were the Na'vi, a primitive species of feline humanoids, standing around 10 feet tall and possessing strength far superior to that of humans. While the depths of their culture and society were studied alongside many attempts to actually form trade pacts, the Na'vi proved incredibly resilient, either rejecting any deal no matter how lucrative, or outright ignoring any attempts to communicate. Scientists would, from across numerous fields, work to create the schoolhouse, acting as an in-between space where humans and Na'vi could share and learn about each other's culture and history. Unfortunately, even these attempts were met with resistance, mostly due to the fact that RDA soldiers opened fire on some Na'vi in the school, but that's neither here nor there. Eventually, forced with no other choices and using the advanced cloning and gene splicing technology at their disposal, the RDA began the process of the Avatar program. A program that would see human Na'vi hybrids being created with their body being used as hosts for their original human mind. Literally creating avatars. Oh, also speaking of, to my one friend in school who said Avatar is a better name for the movie than it was for the show.
You're not just wrong, you're stupid. Now wait just a minute. And you're ugly, just like your mum.
Screw you, Justin. Back to the avatars themselves. These hybrids were meant to not only bridge the cultural divide on a more personal and direct level, it would instead actually be the RDA's own undoing. Jake Sully, a former soldier turned Avatar agent, would lead to the defeat of the RDA and their banishment from Pandora. Luckily, they would return, and in a single day they would do what they didn't have the guts to do in the first place. Incinerate everything! And in its place, Bridgehead City was built. This is where we leave them at the end of the most recent Avatar film, but it's reasonable to assume these guys will only become a more potent and dangerous threat. Since we made it this far, why not leave a like and subscribe to the channel? So then, what about their weapons, armor, and abilities? Well, like our modern day military, the RDA soldiers are armed with non-automatic ballistic weapons. However, where they differ is their minimal protection in the form of full body armor, choosing instead for lighter, more simple protection. That being said though, they make up for this lack of armor with their walkers. Each one is over 10 feet tall and armed with a rifle the size of a tank cannon, possessing enhanced reflexes and strength. Honestly, these things are just basically the Titans from Titanfall, just without any sassy AI. On top of those more traditional sci-fi weapons, the RDA also has access to advanced cloning and gene splicing technology, alongside a thriving biotech division. Together, these branches of the RDA have achieved such accomplishments as the Navi-human hybrids, cloned humans, cloned human-Navi hybrids with genetic memories, and fucking biological immortality. Like, not only is their standard infantry highly effective, but they're also rolling to battle on mag trains and airships, including flying aircraft carriers straight out of Lockheed Martin's playbook. Though speaking of, it's important to cover how exactly they plan to take over Pandora. When it comes to the methods of war of the RDA, it's shockingly humane, given how mustache-twirlingly evil they seem. Because as I said before, they came to Pandora and spent 30 years there without inciting military conflict. Minus that one attack that got Navi children captured and indoctrinated. But I mean, that doesn't count. The RDA doesn't consider that one of their war crimes. If you've watched the movie and read the extended universe material, you'll realize that at every possible point, the RDA actually aimed to avoid the loss of life, and only recently brought in military forces when diplomacy did not work. Meaning, when it comes to choosing our faction for this homebrew, we'll need a faction that is a bit more willing to create treaties and alliances. Though looking at the strategies used during wartime, we could also see that the RDA is willing to make use of massive displays of force, with their airship and armored infantry, plus giving Quarter's statement about wanting to make it humane. Alongside what happens to the tree in the way of water, the RDA was actually holding themselves back, a mistake they corrected very quickly when they came back, unleashing low-orbit incineration and inventing a whole new type of war crime. Nice. So their weapons, armor, and abilities explained and our methods of war covered, we can begin by picking our faction for this homebrew. And as always, let's go over some honorable homebrews first. For the most common homebrew idea I bet most people are willing to immediately suggest is the Astra Militarum, with potentially Space Marines as an allied detachment. With this homebrew, we can take advantage of the Astra Militarum's troops and use them as a basic RDA soldier, with the massive walkers being proxied in as scout sentinels, and the Astartes being our Navi avatar stand-ins. While a pretty human-centric and therefore correct idea, this homebrew doesn't really fit with the overall beliefs and methods of war of this particular faction. Outside of a very rare few Xenos who were brought into the Imperium during the Great Crusade, this isn't a real possibility now, and neither is diplomacy with Xenos, and as a result, we will not be using this faction for this homebrew. Sorry Imperium fanboys, Dad's Empire does have its limitations. So what other options do we have? Well, if I'm gonna be honest, I think we might have to resort to desperate measures. We're gonna have to use the Tau Empire for this homebrew. Shout out to that one Tau fanboy who's been waiting for a long time for me to actually use them. And if you're that Tau fanboy, let me know in the comments below. The Tau Empire is a great choice for this homebrew. With the Tau baseline troops, we can actually easily use them as stand-ins for the grunt and baseline infantry of the RDA. The stealth and crisis suits obviously could be proxies for the walker units the RDA has access to. And of course, the Xeno diplomacy of the Tau is perfect for how the RDA chooses to try and create lasting relations with the Navi. Instead, they got one of their own having relations with the Navi. Speaking of the whole Avatar program, not only do the Tau permit Xenos to join their empire, but they also have access to advanced cloning and biotechnology, allowing for the transfer of consciousness. Something we see in the Pure Tide Engram, or in the most recent Elemental Council book, where just like Korich, a Tau Fireblade is regularly cloned with their memories and experiences transferred over. Side note, this book has one of the biggest pieces of fucking plot armor I've seen in the 40k book in a long time. And you know what? Thinking about it is kind of pissing me off, so skip 30 seconds if you don't want spoilers. The fact that the recruit war leader with a sniper rifle and no ties to the Imperium ship chose not to kill a Space Marine just because is bullshit. It took like a whole cadre to bring this guy down, and when they did and the kill was confirmed, bro just changes his mind. He spent his whole introductory scene salivating over the idea of eating the Astartes in question, and he just changes his mind just to see? Yeah, sorry, that's my one complaint about this book. On the bright side though, it did give us a Space Marine X-Tau ship, so I can't be too mad about that. Anyway, with that pet peeve aside, let's continue with this homebrew, and get to covering some possible builds and kit bashes, before we move on to what to buy and finally writing our lore. With the baseline Fire Warrior acting as our RDA soldier, we could easily treat the Xenos allies as stand-ins for the creatures of Pandora. The crew, for example, could function as our Navi avatars, born and bred on a vicious death world to not only value strength, spirituality, and ancestry. Additionally, there is that theory that all the creatures on Pandora are much more closely related than those on Earth, and it's why all the creatures share an organic USB cable in their head. Because of this theory, it makes way too much sense to not treat the Kroot mounts as stand-ins for the whole variety of creatures the Navi tend to ride in battle. Finally, the thing that sets the Tau up perfectly for this homebrew? The Tau Manta. This thing is basically a glorified table with how big it is, and it works perfectly as a stand-in for the... I'm sorry, what? The Dragon Gunship? That's metal as hell. I thought this thing was called a vertebrate or something like that. But the Dragon? Guys, I'm sorry, but the RDA is looking more and more like a faction I want to join. This thing is awesome. Not only is it the most advanced piece of equipment the RDA has access to, but this thing is virtually impregnable. It is too bad, however, that the Dragon didn't have access to the Tau's heavy rail cannons. These things have 120 inches of range and do 12 damage. No, I am not joking. And what's worse, this thing has 2 of them. I bet if the RDA had even 1 of these, the attack on homebrew would have been a lot easier. Lucky for you, with this homebrew, you wouldn't have to deal with that same issue. Speaking of which, let's get to covering how we're going to be building this homebrew on the tabletop. As always, we'll be aiming for the 500 point mark, that way it's fast, easy, and affordable. So, as usual, when it comes to these homebrews, I always start with the combat patrol for the faction in question. But, how well does this combat patrol fit with the themes and units of the RDA? Well, I'm pleased to say when it comes to building the RDA in 40k, this box is greater than good. Who the fuck writes these jokes? Though, honestly, this box is only second best when compared to the OG Tau Combat Patrol. The Fireblade could have been a peak stand-in for Quaritch, and the Ghost Keel for the mechs used by the RDA. So if you guys have one of these laying around, there you go. There's your perfect introduction to the RDA. And also, screw you, because I honestly wanted one of these to start my own Tau army. As for the rest of us, we've got to settle with the 10th edition Combat Patrol. Though I might be able to argue some bullshit about how this could work. Inside this box, we've got a Tau commander with either an Enforcer or Cold Star battlesuit. Though, honestly, I can never be able to tell a difference. This leader unit is unable to lead anything in this box. But that's okay, because we're going to be using this commander as a fast-moving, hard-hitting beatstick. To do this, I recommend keeping the high-output burst cannon, as a way to gun down chaff and trim through bodyguard units. Additionally, the cyclic ion blaster is great for beating into the more heavily armored units. And worst case scenario, you overcharge the thing and risk some damage for the potential of wiping out key targets. Besides those, I think equipping the Fusion Blaster to use as a last bit of high pen, high damage will definitely make your opponent reconsider his forces. And finally, a shield generator, because if this guy doesn't have one, he's probably going to die on turn 2. To fit the theme, I think this unit would work great as a proxy for the general in charge of Bridgehead. I literally cannot remember her name and I'm too lazy to look it up, but I do know she drank coffee in an exosuit once. Behind the commander, we can cover the Devilfish, since it's honestly not that important. Overall, it's a basic troop transport with very little damage potential. That being said, it could work as a stand-in for the mag trains the RDA uses to transport supplies across Pandora. After them, we got the basic Tau infantry. These Fire Warriors have 2 variants, the Breachers and Strike Team. Though, honestly, the Breachers are my ideal choice for this homebrew. Their aggressive ability to reroll wounds against targets holding objectives is literally just the RDA attacking home tree. Fourth and finally, we have the Pathfinder units, otherwise known as a Tau's version of the Tactical Marines. These guys could function as Spec Ops RDA soldiers, thanks to their marker light abilities and wide range of weapons and equipment. Overall, this box set is an excellent start, but unfortunately, due to GW making all the Tau units incredibly cheap, we are going to have to work to earn that 500 point mark. In case anyone is wondering, we're only at 370 points so far, or 1.85 points per dollar, which is atrocious. I could forgive the low points if the units had some synergy and the commander had units to lead, and I could easily forgive the commander not being able to lead units if the units in this box actually equaled 500 points. Unfortunately, this box fails at both. So, to deal with this issue, I've got 2 solutions. One for the more meta players in the audience who want to play something stronger, and the one for you guys who want to run a bit more of a fun list. First off, we're going with some fun meta builds. I think it's important for us to look into buying a box of Crisis suits. While any variant could work, either the Star Sight or Fire Knife will work for keeping us below the 500 point limit. These guys can be additional mech forces similar to those we see attack home tree. Now, if you do go with the meta option, no one can blame you. But that's not the option we'll be using for this homebrew. Instead, we'll be going for the more fun, Kroot Carnivores. These guys can function as a stand-in for our Navi avatars, and we can even use the fact that the Kroot take on the features of those they consume to explain the weird mutations. Additionally, the crew have access to abilities like Stealth and Scout, especially for a unit that was meant to sneak into another culture and subvert their authority. Wait a second. Maybe the Gene Stealers could have been another option. Oh well, too late now. So depending on which one of these you choose, we'll be looking at either 500 to 510 points. Altogether, this helps us build the RDA in 40k. But what about their lore? Well, let's write it now, shall we? During the 5th Sphere expansion, the Tau came across a previously unexplored and underdeveloped world, classified as Pandora according to the Guevesa Auxiliary. This planet was deemed a death world and was exempt from colonization. Such statements would not stop the Tau, however. Through their advanced technology, they were able to create a habitable zone on the planet. Not a priority in terms of development, however, when the discovery of vast deposits of adamantium and other rare minerals were located across the planet, things quickly changed. As a combined effort was made to transform this planet into something worthwhile, it quickly became evident why Pandora was abandoned. Among the numerous factors that would have classified the planet as a death world, with poisonous atmosphere, overwhelming electromagnetic field, and all manner of natural phenomena, the planet was also home to a feral Xenos population. This population was not too dissimilar to the time of the Mount Ta, when the clans and tribes of the Tau people warred with one another. Hoping that their advanced technology could bring the Xenos into the Empire, they were instead faced with a brutal war for survival. The primitive cultures and beliefs of the Xenos were wholly opposed to the Tau way of life, and meant war was a constant. Luckily, however, many Tau ethereals considered the possibility of using the crude race to not only turn the tide of war, but take advantage of their biological adaptability. Crude hybrids would find their way into the numerous tribes and clans of Pandora, and using their newfound forms, sow chaos and confusion. Once weakened, the Tau Empire would begin their true offensive. As a combination of poison supplies and scorched earth tactics led to the Xenos at Pandora either fleeing deeper into the world's recesses or being forced to submit to their rule. Currently, the planet of Pandora provides vast exports in the form of rare minerals and highly skilled fire warriors. The planet's harsh environment, rigorous training, and direct study of the Pandoran Xenos war tactics has bred a highly competent and capable military force, one that has earned a prestigious reputation among the hunter cadres of the Tau Empire. Leading these hunter cadres are renowned fireblades who are all clones of the first Tau commander to achieve victory on this world, Chassot Cor Rich. And there you have it, the sub-world of Pandora, a planet within the Tau Empire full of danger and potential. What do you guys think of this homebrew? How would you expand on its lore, and what would you change? And of course, will you be painting your own version of this army? Let me know all that in the comment section below. Thank you all so much, and thank you again for making it to the end. You guys are awesome. And besides that, I've got nothing else to say, and I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. Bye.